Secretary of Defense asked her call sign as a joke, until Iron Angel made him kneel before all. It began as a day of ceremony, a showcase of power, pride, and politics. Cameras rolled, medals gleamed, and words like honor and progress echoed through the base. But beneath the polished speeches and the rehearsed smiles, something real was about to break through the facade. Among the ranks stood one woman whose silence carried more weight than any speech that day. They called her Iron Angel, a name whispered with reverence and mystery. No one knew what it meant, not even the Secretary of Defense, who would soon regret asking. When arrogance meets truth, the world stops watching and starts remembering. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive with noise, it walks in quietly, wearing a soldier's uniform. If you believe truth should still matter, subscribe now, like this video, and share with someone who needs to see that real strength isn't loud, it's steadfast. As the motorcade arrived and the cameras began flashing, no one could imagine that before the day ended, one man would lose everything he stood for, and one soldier would remind the world what honor truly means. The morning sun hung low over Falcon Point, slicing through the fog like a blade of light. Soldiers lined the courtyard in perfect formation, their boots clicking in rhythm as the motorcade approached. Inside the black limousine sat Secretary of Defense Alexander Rourke, reviewing his notes with a smirk. Today wasn't about honoring soldiers. It was about repairing his image after the disastrous Operation Sandvale. Cameras were ready, reporters whispered, and every salute he received felt choreographed. Yet beneath the surface, tension rippled through the base, something unspoken, something waiting to be unleashed. Rourke stepped out, radiating authority in his tailored suit. His voice carried like a command even when he merely greeted the officers. "Good morning, gentlemen. And ladies," he added with the faintest smile, more for the cameras than for sincerity. He was here to inspect a new elite unit, one that dared to include women in combat roles. To him, it was a publicity stunt. To the soldiers, it was the culmination of years of sacrifice. But to one woman standing in the last row, it was something else entirely. Unfinished business wrapped in silence. Captain Evelyn Shaw adjusted her cap, eyes fixed on the horizon. She had hoped to remain invisible today, another uniform among dozens. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. A whisper moved down the line. That's her, the Iron Angel. She ignored it, as she always did. The name wasn't a badge of pride to her. It was a grave marker for memories she could never bury. When the order came for the officers to assemble in the main hall, she moved with mechanical precision, unaware that her past was already standing at the podium. Inside the hall, flags framed the stage like watchful sentinels. The air was thick with the scent of polish and formality. Rourke took his place at the microphone, exuding confidence. He began his speech about progress and unity, but every word sounded hollow against the discipline of the soldiers below. His gaze drifted across the crowd and stopped on Evelyn, her calm, her stillness. Something about her stirred an old echo in his mind. He had seen eyes like those before, in reports he tried to forget. He blinked, dismissing the thought, and continued smiling. From her place near the aisle, Evelyn could feel his gaze lingering. It wasn't admiration. It was curiosity laced with arrogance. He leaned slightly toward the press crew and whispered, "Let's see how these Iron Angels perform under real pressure." The microphones caught only fragments, but enough to draw faint smiles among the aides. Evelyn's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. Her silence was a weapon sharper than any retort. In that stillness, she became the center of gravity in the room, without saying a word. Major Daniel Reeves, standing a few seats away, watched the exchange with unease. He knew that tone in Rourke's voice, mockery disguised as charm. Reeves had served alongside Evelyn years ago, during the mission that nearly ended them all. He knew what Iron Angel meant and what it had cost her. His instinct was to intervene, to cut off the tension before it turned into something public. But Evelyn's expression stopped him. There was a quiet fire in her eyes that said, "Not yet." The speech dragged on. Rourke shifted from hollow praise to jokes, earning polite laughter from the audience. When the applause finally came, it was rehearsed, automatic. But before leaving the stage, Rourke scanned the officers once more. His gaze found Evelyn again, and this time he asked, almost casually, "Captain, remind me, what's your call sign?" The words floated to the hall, like a challenge. A few soldiers stiffened. Evelyn met his eyes. "Iron Angel, sir." He smirked. How poetic. The silence that followed was unbearable. Even the cameras hesitated to click. Evelyn didn't move. She didn't blink. Then, with steady calm, she replied, "It was earned." Her tone was neither defensive nor proud. It was a verdict. Something in the room shifted. The aide stopped smiling. Rourke blinked, caught off guard by the weight of her words. The air changed temperature, and everyone could feel it, though no one understood why. As the ceremony ended, murmurs filled the hall. Reeves caught up to Evelyn as she exited. "He doesn't know who you are," he whispered. She looked straight ahead. "He doesn't remember what he did," she answered softly. The words carried no anger, only certainty. She paused at the threshold, glancing back once at the man shaking hands and laughing for the cameras. Her expression was unreadable, somewhere between control and quiet reckoning. Whatever storm she carried within, it was gathering strength now. Outside, the wind howled across the base, lifting the flags in perfect synchronization. The ceremony had concluded, but the real confrontation had only begun. Somewhere in the crowd, a soldier muttered, "If he knew who she really is," and the words lingered like a prophecy. Evelyn's boots echoed down the concrete path, each step deliberate and measured, like someone walking toward destiny rather than away from it. The banquet hall glimmered with crystal glasses and hollow laughter. Generals, aides, and dignitaries mingled beneath chandeliers that reflected a false sense of harmony. Rourke sat at the head of the table, basking in admiration. To him, this dinner was a stage, a performance where power dressed itself in charm. He raised his glass, calling for another toast. To progress to unity, he declared, before turning his eyes toward Evelyn. "And to those who prove that angels can fly with iron wings." The line drew a ripple of laughter. To everyone else it was wit. To her, it was salt on an open wound. Evelyn's hand tightened around her glass, but her face remained calm. She wasn't new to humiliation. She had learned long ago that silence could wound deeper than fury. Rourke continued talking, making light conversation about call signs as if they were funny nicknames. He had no idea that the one he mocked was forged in blood and fire. Across the table, Reeves watched her, his jaw locked, his eyes pleading for her to hold back. She nodded slightly, a signal of control. She would not explode here, not yet. But every word the secretary spoke chipped away at the thin wall between memory and rage. Rourke leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Tell me, Captain, why, Iron Angel? Did you pick it yourself, or did some journalist write it for you?" His tone was teasing, but the arrogance beneath it was unmistakable. Evelyn met his gaze, her voice steady. "It was given to me, sir." The laughter dimmed. "By whom?" he asked. "By those who didn't make it home." The table went silent. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Rourke's smirk faltered. A long pause stretched before he chuckled weakly, pretending it was just a misunderstanding. But the chill in the room said otherwise. As the band resumed playing soft jazz, conversations restarted in whispers. Rourke tried to recover his dominance, telling an embellished story of his own combat days, conveniently edited for heroism. Evelyn listened quietly, her expression unreadable, but inside, old images returned, sand, smoke, the screams of men who trusted orders that led them to death. She could still feel the weight of one of them in her arms. Every word from Rourke twisted the knife of memory deeper. Yet her composure held, cold and immaculate. Her restraint itself became defiance. Reeves couldn't take it anymore. He leaned toward her, whispering, "You don't have to do this." She replied without looking at him, "I already am." Her calm unsettled him more than anger ever could. He saw in her eyes the same resolve she had during the mission, the quiet certainty of someone who knew what must be done, regardless of the cost. The moment felt suspended in time, the hum of voices fading under the weight of something unspoken. A storm was forming, and no one else in the room could sense it. When dessert was served, Rourke raised his glass again, still clinging to the illusion of control. "To courage," he said, his eyes locking with hers. "To those who serve and those who inspire." There was mockery hidden in the compliment. Evelyn rose slowly, every eye following her. "To truth," she said softly. "It lasts longer." Then she sat back down, leaving the toast unfinished. The orchestra missed a beat. Even Rourke didn't have a reply ready. The cameras that had been filming lowered quietly, unsure whether to keep recording. The evening dragged on, but the energy had changed. The officers no longer laughed at Rourke's jokes. They glanced at Evelyn with quiet awe. The name Iron Angel now carried weight in the air, even among those who didn't yet know its meaning. Rourke tried to steer the event back toward pleasantries, but his voice no longer commanded the room. Evelyn had taken the center, without moving an inch. For the first time in his career, Rourke felt small in his own banquet. When the dinner ended, he approached her, perhaps to reassert his dominance, or out of curiosity he didn't understand. "You're quite composed, Captain," he said. "But I wonder, is that discipline or fear?" Evelyn turned to him slowly. "Neither, sir," she replied. "It's memory." The words landed like shrapnel, quiet but irreversible. He didn't know it yet, but the joke he began would soon become a confession that ended him. The next morning, the corridors of Falcon Point buzzed with uneasy whispers. What had happened at the dinner wasn't forgotten. It had spread like wildfire through every barrack. Rourke's entourage tried to spin it as a light misunderstanding, but soldiers had seen the look in Captain Shaw's eyes. It wasn't misunderstanding they'd witnessed. It was control. Cold, disciplined, terrifying control. Evelyn walked to the halls with quiet purpose, a sealed envelope in her hand. Today was the final inspection before the secretary's departure, and she intended to face him once more, this time on her own terms. Rourke stood inside the command office, reviewing reports with his aides. He looked tired but defiant, determined to erase the awkwardness of the night before. When Evelyn entered, the room froze. "Captain Shaw," he greeted, feigning warmth. "I hope there are no hard feelings about last night." She saluted sharply, placing a small, age medal on the desk. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" He hesitated. "Granted." Her voice was steady. "This belonged to Lieutenant Marcus Shaw. You authorized his last mission." Rourke's expression faltered as he looked down at the blood-stained medal. A shadow crossed his face. For a long moment, he said nothing. The aides glanced nervously at one another. "Your brother was a fine soldier," Rourke muttered finally. "A tragedy of war, nothing more." Evelyn's jaw clenched. "It wasn't a tragedy, sir. It was an order." Many twists, the realization hit him. This wasn't about grief. It was about accountability. "Iron Angel," he murmured under his breath, the name suddenly sounding less poetic. Evelyn met his eyes. "Some names are earned, sir. Others are given by ghosts." The silence after that line hung heavy, echoing through the metal walls. He straightened, trying to reclaim his authority. "I won't discuss classified missions with subordinates." She stepped forward, placing the sealed envelope atop the medal. "Then you'll discuss them with yourself. It's all there, your authorizations, your signatures, the casualties you buried under silence." His face drained the color. "Where did you get this?" he demanded. She didn't answer. "You always said truth serves order, didn't you?" she asked. "So tell me, Secretary, what happens when truth becomes the order?" The micro gancho hit hard. Even his aides dared not breathe. He opened the envelope with trembling hands, flipping to the first page. The classified stamp glared back at him like a wound reopened. Each document carried his signature: the mission details, the denial orders, the falsified reports. His mouth went dry. Evelyn watched without emotion, her calm almost cruel in its restraint. "You think you're exposing me," he hissed. "You'll destroy your own career." She tilted her head slightly. "My career ended that night, sir. I just never stopped reporting for duty." Mini twist. Rourke suddenly understood the nightmare he'd been dismissing for years. The woman standing before him wasn't just a survivor. She was the last voice of the men he had sent to die. "You should have died there," he whispered, half in horror, half in disbelief. Evelyn didn't flinch. "I did," she said quietly. "The part that believed you'd ever take responsibility." Every word was a blade. The aides began retreating toward the door, their loyalty crumbling in silence. The balance of power in the room had shifted irreversibly. Reeves entered, having been summoned by protocol, and stopped dead at the sight of the scene. Evelyn turned to him briefly. "Major, please confirm the authenticity of these documents." His voice trembled but firmed. "I can, sir. I was there." Another crack formed in Rourke's composure. He slammed the folder shut. "This is insubordination," he barked. But even he knew his authority was collapsing under the weight of truth. Evelyn stood unmoved, her posture the very definition of discipline. The micro gancho tightened. The moment of exposure was close. As she turned to leave, Rourke spoke again, voice breaking. "Why bring this to me? Why now?" Evelyn paused at the door, glancing back. "Because yesterday you asked me to explain my name." She looked at him one last time, eyes steady, voice cold as steel. "Now you know." The door shut behind her, the echo louder than any explosion. Inside, the Secretary of Defense stood alone, staring at the metal that wouldn't stop shining to the morning light. Proof that ghosts still saluted in silence. By noon, the conference room was filled with tension thick enough to silence every breath. The Secretary called for an emergency briefing, hoping to reassert control. Yet when Evelyn Shaw entered, every pair of eyes shifted toward her, as if the center of gravity had changed. She carried no folder, no weapon, only the truth. The hum of the projector filled the room as she placed a single flash drive on the table. "Permission to present evidence," she said firmly. Rourke hesitated, then nodded. He thought he could contain whatever she had. He was wrong. The projector flickered to life, casting cold light across polished metals and rigid faces. The first slide showed a mission log, Operation Sandvale. Rourke's signature stood stark at the bottom of every page. A murmur rippled through the officers. Evelyn narrated each entry, her voice steady, surgical. Unit Alpha requested extraction 3 times. Authorization denied. 42 confirmed dead, 12 missing in action, 6 carried out by 1 survivor. The silence that followed was deafening. Rourke's throat constricted. "This is classified," he snapped. Evelyn replied, "So is the truth." Reeves stepped forward, breaking protocol. "Sir, I was there," he said, his voice cutting to the air like a gunshot. "I confirmed the data. She saved my life." Rourke's mask cracked, fury flashing behind his eyes. "You're out of line, Major," he barked, but the authority in his tone was gone. Reeves stood taller. "No, sir. I'm standing exactly where honor demands." The line struck like a hammer. The room shifted, the hierarchy inverted. The men who once stood behind the Secretary now watched in silence, afraid to align with a sinking ship. The next slide appeared. A classified communication order, bearing Rourke's own initials, explicitly denying extraction for political timing reasons. Gasps spread like wildfire. The evidence was undeniable. Evelyn didn't gloat. She simply stepped back, letting the truth do the talking. "You left them there," she said, quietly. "You let them die to protect the speech." He slammed his fist against the table. "You don't understand how politics works." She met his fury with calm steel. "No, sir, you don't understand how loyalty works." The Secretary's face drained a color as the weight of his own decisions crashed down. For years, he had buried the operation under layers of bureaucracy and silence. Now, his legacy unraveled in front of every witness. "You think you can ruin me," he hissed. Evelyn's tone remained steady. "You already did that yourself." The room trembled with the tension of truth laid bare. The officers, once motionless, now looked between them, realizing they were witnessing not mutiny, but reckoning. Evelyn revealed the final image, a black and white photo of survivors after extraction. Her younger self, bloodied and limping, carrying 2 soldiers on her back. The caption beneath read, "Rescued under enemy fire." Code name, Iron Angel. The truth had a face now. Rourke's breath hitched as he stared at the photo. The myth he once mocked now stood alive before him, unshaken. The man who ruled through power had met the woman who ruled through conscience, and lost. A pin could have dropped in that room, and sounded like thunder. Evelyn turned off the projector. "I'm not here for vengeance," she said softly. "I'm here for remembrance." The words pierced deeper than accusation. For the first time, Rourke couldn't speak. The shame he had outrun for a decade finally caught him. His knees trembled. Reeves took a step closer to her side, silent but resolute, the physical manifestation of loyalty restored. The Secretary looked around the table. No one met his gaze. When Evelyn saluted and turned to leave, Rourke's voice cracked behind her. You wanted justice? You destroyed everything. She stopped at the door, glancing over her shoulder. No, sir. I've restored what you destroyed. Then she walked out, her boots echoing like the toll of judgment. The room remained frozen, the projection screen still glowing faintly with her image, an angel forged in iron, and a man kneeling beneath the weight of his own sins. The hallways outside the conference room were silent, stripped of the false noise that had filled them hours earlier. The air itself felt heavier, as though the building carried the weight of everything that had been exposed. Rourke walked out last, his steps uncertain, his authority drained. Officers stood at attention but avoided his eyes. The cameras that once followed him now hesitated, unsure if they were witnessing a resignation or a reckoning. At the far end of the corridor, Evelyn Shaw waited, still composed, as if she had been expecting this exact moment. He stopped a few paces away, the silence between them stretching longer than any speech. You think this changes anything? He asked, his voice raw, stripped to its former edge. Evelyn studied him quietly. It already has, she said. The truth always does. Rourke's eyes darted toward the soldiers now gathering nearby, drawn by whispers of what had happened inside. For the first time in his career, he was surrounded not by subordinates, but by witnesses. And witnesses, he realized, were far more dangerous than enemies. He tried to stand taller, but his body betrayed him. You humiliated me, he said, his tone wavering between anger and shame. Evelyn took a step closer, her voice low but resonant. No, sir. I reminded them what honor looks like. The crowd around them grew. The whispers turned into silence again, the kind of silence that demands accountability. Reeves stood among them, not as a protector, but as a reflection of conscience. What happened next would not be recorded in any report, but would live forever in the eyes of those who saw it. Rourke looked down, then back up, struggling for words that refused to come. His lips trembled as the enormity of it sank in. Not the loss of his career, but the loss of the illusion that had defined him. Evelyn's expression softened, but only slightly. Kneel, she said. Her tone wasn't commanding. It was reverent, almost sorrowful. Not for me, for them. Her hand gestured toward the memorial wall behind her, engraved with the names of the fallen. It was not a demand for punishment. It was an invitation to truth. The moment seemed to last an eternity. Rourke's hands trembled. His legs buckled. Slowly, he lowered himself to the floor. A man who had ruled nations now bowed before the memory of those he'd erased. No one moved. No one dared to breathe. Evelyn didn't look triumphant. There was no satisfaction in her eyes, only a quiet grief. For her, this was not victory. It was closure. Justice had spoken, and it had spoken softly. Reeves stepped forward and saluted. One by one, the soldiers followed, the sound of synchronized motion echoing through the hall. Rourke bowed his head lower, his tears falling onto the polished floor. The image was unforgettable, an unspoken confession. Evelyn stood before him, steady as stone. Her shadow fell across him like a mantle, not of judgment, but of absolution. The legend of Iron Angel was no longer a story whispered in barracks. It had become the conscience of the uniform itself. As she turned to leave, Rourke lifted his head. Captain, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Was it worth it? She paused. Every truth costs something, sir. I just stopped letting others pay the price. Then she walked away, the rhythmic sound of her boots merging with the faint rustle of flags outside. The wind carried her words down the corridor, as if the base itself had exhaled for the first time in years. Outside, the sunlight broke through the clouds. The same courtyard that had welcomed arrogance now bore witness to redemption. A few young soldiers stood watching, unaware that they had just seen history bend. Not through war, but through conscience. Evelyn stopped by the memorial wall, resting her fingers on one name. For the fallen, she murmured. Then, under her breath, not forgotten. The phrase, simple yet eternal, closed the circle she had been walking for years. Later, when the footage leaked online, it wasn't the documents that captured the world's attention. It was the image of a powerful man kneeling before a quiet soldier. The caption read only 3 words, Iron Angel Lives. And in that silence, in that posture of humility, an entire nation remembered what courage truly meant. If this story moved you, Subscribe to our channel and share it with someone who believes in truth, justice, and courage. More stories like this are on the way, each one reminding us that honor is never outdated. Become a member today to help us keep these voices alive. Because heroes like Iron Angel never fade, they rise again.